All right. So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Wednesday, apparently. I hope everyone's okay. I hope everyone is enjoying their classes. And if you're in Vancouver, I hope you're not depressed by the rain, because it does rain a little bit. But, the last few summers here have been quite dry. So, I don't know if that will happen this year again, but, we may have a nice warm, dry summer, maybe. Maybe. Um, Anything interesting we should talk about to start? Anything on your mind? No? No? Okay. So, let's see. Okay, let's see who's here. So, Zartaj is here. Good morning, Zartaj. Reza's here. Good morning to you. Awais is here. Good morning to you, Awais. Basil's here. Good morning, Basil. Simran is here. Good morning. Good morning, Simran. Sean is here. Good morning, Sean. And Hamad is here. Good morning, Hamad. And interestingly, technology is amazing, is it not? It is. And so, yeah, Awais says, oh, it's raining in Pakistan as well. So we actually know, well, I mean, we could look on the phone, but for some reason it's different when someone personally tells you that it's raining so far away. Yeah, that's cool. Good morning. Come on in. And Hassan says good morning too. Good morning, Hassan. All right, let's jump in. Let's do this. So yesterday, Mir is here. Good morning, Mir. Yesterday we were just kind of introducing I guess the direction from which we want to come at social justice. So we just want to, there's some kind of theoretical framework, kind of an approach or a perspective or, a way of looking at things that I think we need to know. And so that's kind of why we're doing this. It's only going to take, maybe today and a bit of tomorrow, but it will sort of set the stage for other things that we talk about, and it'll help other things make sense. Okay. Yesterday we kind of defined social justice as this, right? A desire to respect people's human rights, to see people as equals, and to ensure that everyone has the kind of equal opportunity and equal ability to access resources in society, right? So we're not necessarily saying that everyone has to be perfectly equal. We're not saying that that's even desirable or possible, but we are saying that we want to respect people's ability to get what they need and do what they want. And when we see big inequalities, we want to fix those, right? We want to create a situation where there is less inequality if possible, right? I was just reading, my partner is a school teacher, so she teaches grades 6 and 7, and they are, her class, I think this week, is reading a story called Harrison Bergeron. Has anyone read it? Harrison Bergeron by Kurt Vonnegut. It's a short story, and it's very strange. And it talks about this idea of kind of fixing equality, but it's sort of a science fiction future story, and it's kind of very weird for that reason. I don't know if we'll talk about it in here or not, but it was just something that came up in terms of creating inequality. Creating equality. I was curious if anyone had read it. But that's kind of what we said what social justice was, right? And we said that we were going to take a critical approach here, and by critical I meant we were going to kind of carefully look at what we know and understand that, of course, we believe that society is stratified, right? Which I think, again, we kind of all intuitively understand. That our perceptions of the world aren't all the same, right? We see and perceive and understand things slightly differently, kind of depending on who we are, right? And that has to do with our personal characteristics and the way we think about things, but it also has to do with our cultural background, our ethnic background, our religious background, but it also has to do with the social groups that we belong to, right? Whether we're men or women, whether we're what our sexuality is, what our religious orientation is, what our citizenship status is, what our age is, what our race or ethnicity is. All of those things are all of those things are connected. And so, again, not everyone sees things exactly the same, and we have to understand that people will understand things differently. And finally, the idea that sometimes knowledge is counterintuitive. And so that third point is kind of connected to the second one, right? Because sometimes the way we think things aren't in fact the way they are at all, right? But just because we think something is common sense, or we think something should be this way, doesn't mean that it actually is, okay? And so one of the things that we use to, an example we used to talk about this idea was the flat earth, right? So the idea that, yeah, we experience the world as flat, right? We look out the window, we walk down the street, it kind of feels flat, right? But of course, because of science, we know that it's not, right? And some of us may have had the opportunity to actually, be high enough, maybe in a plane where you can see it kind of curve at the edges. Maybe if you've gone, to the ocean and watched a ship sail away, you'll see it kind of disappear over the horizon, right? And so if we're careful, we can observe these things, but it's not really that intuitive that the earth is round, right? And of course, lots of people in the past for hundreds and thousands of years did actually think the world was flat. And again, who could blame them? Because it does feel that way, right? And so because knowledge is kind of counterintuitive sometimes, sometimes it leads us to make statements that are partially true or kind of over generalizations. And to do with social justice, these are some of the things that people will commonly say or tweet or put in an Instagram post. And again, lots of these are, they're desirable, right? They sound good. They're things that we should try to do. But again, they're not entirely correct, right? They're not reflective of how things are. And in some ways they represent, in some ways they're problematic in their own ways. And so, I put these up here, but I also admitted that, in the past I've probably said all of these things, right? With no, with kind of no conception of the sort of deeper layers of these. And so, again, I see people as individuals, right? As I treat everyone the same. People are just people. I treat people individually. And I try to, right? And I want to, and I think people should be treated as individuals, but I also know now that there's kind of more going on a social level, right? People aren't treated all exactly the same, right? And again, if if The Rock or Rihanna walked into this classroom, you would treat them differently than you treat me, right? If your grandmother or grandfather came into the room, you would treat them different than you would treat anyone else, right? And so we constantly treat people differently depending on their identities, and so that of course extends to social groups as well, and we'll get to how that works, right? But again, a lot of these things they sound good. Oh, good morning. I think that's Elizabeth. I think so. I'm not sure. I lost my train of thought. What was I talking about? Social justice, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah? Something social justice-y?
Seeing people as individuals.
Right. Seeing people. Yeah, so it's very nice, it's very desirable, but often it's not really true of the way people operate, and I'll try to show you that. Some of these are problematic here as well. Some of them are true or partly true, or maybe ways that we would like things to be, but again, it's not entirely the way that that society works, right? And so we'll talk about some of these ideas as we go forward, okay? Right. Okay. So the other thing I want to talk about in terms of critical theory, and again, critical theory is a big body of theory, and there's lots of ways in which critical theory can be used. We're just kind of dipping our toe in it here. We're just taking a little bit of what we need, and then we're going to keep going, okay? The other part of critical theory is talking about the critical theory of knowledge, right? The things that you know. So think about all the things that you know, okay? All of those kind of facts inside your head, everything you've been taught, formulas, everything, right? All the knowledge in your head that you have received. In many cases, good morning. In many cases, we'd like to believe that knowledge is objective, right? Facts are just facts. That's it, right? A fact is a fact. There's no extra stuff attached to it. But in terms of critical thinking, in terms of critical theory, critical theorists want to understand not only what the piece of information is, but what sort of political and social meanings are attached to it, okay? And that may sound a little bit bizarre, but let me try to give you an example here, and maybe it will make some more sense. Sorry, I'm just going to jump here. Okay. Do you know who this is? Do you know who this is? Do you want to take a guess? Not a clue? No. He's, yeah, okay. He isn't, okay, let me tell you this. So, he is in fact Christopher Columbus. Okay? This is apparently what he looked like. I don't know if they used any filters on his portrait, so maybe he wasn't quite as dashing and dreamy as he looks here, but here's a painting of Christopher Columbus. Now that you know who he is, what do you know about him? What's that? He discovered, sorry?
He discovered the America.
Yeah. He discovered the Americas, North and South America, right? What else do we know about him? Sorry? He was evil. Why? How is he evil? Okay. So there's an idea floating around out there that he is evil. Okay. What else do we know about this guy? Anything at all. Yeah, so Ben says he explored the Atlantic Ocean. That's true, he did, right? He sailed across it before discovering North and South America. That is true. What was he sailing for in the first place? Yeah, so he was looking for a trade route to India. And so at the time there was lots of trade going on, and the way to India was kind of out west from Europe and then down around the bottom part of Africa, down by South Africa, then you sail up, right? But the sea down around the bottom part of Africa is very treacherous. It's very stormy. Lots of ships were sinking, and so people were saying, you know, we need a better way, right? We don't want to keep losing all of our merchandise, and so the idea was to sail west and hopefully encounter India, right? But of course, Columbus encounters this place instead. What else? What else do we know about this guy? Yeah, so Away says he was looking for India. Let me see. Reza says he discovered tobacco. Okay, that's interesting. Paved the way for European exploration and colonization. Okay. Anything else we know about him? No? Do you want to take, okay, we're going to take 90 seconds, okay? 90 seconds, and I want you to quickly internet search and see if you can find maybe 2 facts about him that we don't already know, okay? 90 seconds. I'm not going to put it on the clock, I'm just going to guess. Okay, 60 more seconds. We need 2 things that we don't already know about Mr. Columbus here. Okay. Time's up. Give me a fact. Malika, what should we know about this guy?
He didn't understand that he discovered the America.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And maybe he killed kind of people. I don't know the name. Let me check.
Okay. So one thing we learned is that he actually didn't realize that he had discovered a new continent. At first he thought he was in India, right? And he killed somebody or some people?
Indians?
Okay. So yeah, so the indigenous people that live in North and South America, originally he called them Indians because he thought he was in India. Shortly after that, he realized that he was in fact not in India, but the name kind of stuck. And so sometimes indigenous people in Canada and the US are still referred to as Indians, but they have no relation to India, but the name kind of stuck. But yeah, so okay. So that's okay, 2 things, good. Ryan, what do you got?
He's Italian,
He's Italian, okay, cool.
and even in that, he continued his voyage across the Atlantic Ocean.
He continued his voyage. What came before that?
Even in that, like,
Even in death?
yeah.
No, he lived for quite some time. Like he continued his voyages until his death?
I guess. I'm not sure.
Okay. That's okay. That's okay. That's a good one though. He's an Italian, we know that. Victoria?
He's not Italian.
He's not Italian?
Yeah, he was born in Italy, but he's not Italian.
Oh, what is he?
He's from Spain.
Oh, he's Spanish.
Yeah.
Okay. So he's Spanish, born in Italy.
And,
What else do we know?
apparently after his death, the family was going
Okay. After his death, they brought him home, or they brought him here. Oh, okay. Find out for us. I wonder where he's buried. Nicole, what do you got for us? What?
His date of birth.
His date of birth? Okay, what was it?
31st October
31st of October,
1451.
1451. Okay. So a solid 600 or 700 years ago, right? Wow, okay. Do you have one more for me? or maybe go to Poom. Poom, what do you got for me?
I know when he died.
You know when he died? Okay, when did he die?
20 May 15,
20th May 1616?
15 and
1516?
1106.
Okay, okay. All right. Kang, what do you got for me?
He has one children. He has one son.
He-
His name is Fernando.
Okay, so he has one son, Diego. Okay, good. And Daniel, what do you got for me? One thing we should know about this man.
He returned to Spain in chains.
I'm sorry, say again?
He returned to Spain in chains.
He returned to Spain in chains? Sounds like there's a story there. Do you have any idea why? Who hasn't, right? Who hasn't returned to Spain in chains?
Began colonial government from Hispaniola, Gibraltar, and Channel. Native islanders who didn't collect enough wool to have their armed cover and rebuild Spanish colonies were executed and banished.
Okay, yeah, he was the governor of a place called Hispaniola, right? Nowadays we call that it's the island that has Haiti and the Dominican Republic on it. So that island is divided in half. One half is Haiti, one half is Dominican Republic, and originally that was Hispaniola, and so it was governed by Mr. Columbus after he discovered North and South America. Okay, and yeah, lots of people were. He was a harsh and brutal governor, as far as we know. Let me think. What do you got?
Was he bad guy?
Ooh, good question. Press pause on that, and we'll deal with it very shortly. So Hassan here says he was an explorer and a navigator. Yeah, here Awais says also he was chained and stripped of his governorship and sent back to Spain. Oof, that must have been embarrassing. Let's see. Basil says he made 4 voyages. Ooh, kidnapped and enslaved thousands of people in Hispaniola. Oof, ouch. San says he's a traitor. Okay, like as in trading, not traitor. Simran says he enslaved and mutilated indigenous people. That sounds pretty bad. Captured some Native Americans. Died thinking that he found Asia. I'm not sure that's true, Hassan. I think he kind of realized. I think initially he thought he was in Asia, but after a while he kind of figured out, oh, this is a new place. I think he did anyway. Sean says he proved the Earth was round. Okay, and so. Let me see. Okay. Any last things we should know about him?
Some people call him that the discoverer of America.
Yeah, he's called the discoverer of America, right? He's kind of the founding father, if you will, of both the United States and Canada, right? Because his discovery kind of set in motion people coming here and creating colonies and then eventually countries, right? So the US and Canada exist because of the activities of this guy, right? So he's a very important historical figure, right? Particularly, well, just period. He's an important historical figure. Okay, that's good. So all of those things are good pieces of information to have in the story of Columbus, right? So He indeed completed 4 voyages, again looking for a trade route to India, found something else by accident, and so Europe was kind of discovered this new continent that they didn't know existed, right? And they discovered it because of him. Now, so this is this was the way the people saw the world in 1492, and so world maps were not super well developed, and so I think we can see that sort of looks correct, but not really. So again, people were trying to get to Asia, they were trying to get to India, they had been sailing around the bottom part of Africa there, and it was quite dangerous, and so Christopher Columbus sailed west, in theory, hoping to come around and bump into India. But as we know, that did not happen. He sailed in ships that looked like these. There were 3 of them: the Pinta, Santa Maria, the Pinta, and the Nina?
Yes.
Yeah. 3 ships that looked like this, sailed off, and then he arrives in the New World, right? And probably didn't look quite like this, but this is an artist's rendition of Columbus coming ashore in the New World, probably thanking God or something, I'm not sure. Now, what's the story of this guy? Well, in lots of schools in the past, in North America, here in Canada or the US, the story we heard about Columbus was this: that he was, good morning, that he was a brave explorer, that he, sailed off, across the ocean to discover a route to India. Instead, he discovered the New World, and, that sort of set in motion the process of creating these great countries, Canada and the US, right? That's kind of that's the story that a lot of school kids are told. And again, he's kind of seen as a hero, right? To the point where the US actually has Columbus Day on, I think it changes because it's on a weekend. Or does it? I'm not really sure if the date changes or not. In 2020, it was October the 12th, right? So they actually have the US has a holiday celebrating this guy, right? And so if you get a holiday named after you, you're kind of a big deal, right? So he's kind of a big deal, this Columbus guy. And again, we often hear this idea too that he proved the earth was round, right? He attempted to sail to India by going west, and of course didn't get there, but found something else, right? These are kind of the elements of the Christopher Columbus story that school children are taught. Now, is this a true story? Was he an explorer? Yeah, I would say so. Was he brave? I would think so. To go out into the open ocean in one of those tiny wooden boats. You have to be brave or crazy, I would say, but off he went, right? So I think he was brave. Did he discover the New World? No? Why not? It existed,
Yeah.
and
There were also people
yeah,
there.
there were people here already, right? So it wasn't so much. So Europe discovered it, right? Europe didn't know it existed, but of course the people here very much knew that it existed, and they'd lived here for thousands of years already, right? So again, his discovery is, a matter of perspective, right? Europe discovered it, but indigenous people who already lived here, of course, did not. Did he prove that the world was round? Huh? Sort of? Why do you say that?
Because the only way he could do this because he was thinking of going that direction and making the people know that there wasn't any scientific proof.
Okay. So, yeah, so you would at least have to have the conception that the Earth was round, right? If you thought the Earth was flat, this would be a suicide mission, right? You would sail right off the end of the Earth and never be heard from again. So he at least believed enough in a round Earth to sail off in this direction, right? So we know that. So again, why are we dealing with this? Well, a critical theorist would argue that yes, these are all generally facts about Christopher Columbus, or they're part of the Columbus story. Some of them are true, some of them are a little bit less so. But lots of people would say, well, yeah, this is just history, right? That's the story of Columbus, right? These are the facts, blah, 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 blah. What's the big deal, right? But the story itself is socially constructed, okay? And so, again, the things that we add into the story and the things that we leave out are important, right? And because the things that get added into the story and the things that get left out have a lot to do with power in society, right? They have to do with the values and the interests of the people who are telling the story in the first place, right? So what that means is that everything you know, all the things that we know, are connected to our social context, right? So again, who you think Columbus is kind of depends on who you are, right? So again, if you're an American, let's say, then you might be very invested in thinking about Columbus as the brave explorer, right? Who, sails off across the ocean, proves the Earth was round, discovers this new land, and then, wave after wave of brave colonists, come here and they battle the elements and, the weather and bears, and they manage to create this wonderful country that they call America, right? And so there's this kind of thread that goes through the story, right, of being brave and sort of battling the natural elements and creating something out of nothing, and all those kind of pieces are fit into the story. But again, think about the story from the other side, and a couple of those facts came out when we started Googling him, right? So he was, yes, he discovered the New World for Europe, but again, he didn't discover it for indigenous people. And indeed, from an indigenous perspective, for indigenous people, it's kind of the beginning of the end for them, right? Because after he arrives, more and more Europeans arrive for the next few hundred years, and they bring with them weapons that are, difficult for indigenous people to compete with. They bring diseases with them, which decimate indigenous populations, and eventually, as you know, Europeans kind of take over the place, right? And indigenous people are either killed, or they die of disease, or they're simply pushed aside, right? So that, white Europeans can create the United States or can create Canada. And so, if you're an indigenous person, you're not looking at Columbus as a hero, right? He's the guy that kind of, sets in motion not the end of your culture, but certainly the end of your way of life, right? Some other things came up in the story too. I think Daniel mentioned that he executed a lot of people as governor of Hispaniola, right? And if you look into his history a little more, his personal history, you'll find out that he was a horrible person, right? He enslaved indigenous people, he executed them, he paid, I think, bounties on their lives. He was involved in sex trafficking and marrying child brides to people. And I mean, a lot of those things were much more normal in, the 1400s than they are today, of course. But even by those standards, he was still a bad guy, right? Like he was bad for the time. Never mind now. So again, the historical record shows that he was an awful person, right? And did a lot of horrible things. But here we are telling the story to our kids that, he was a brave explorer who discovered this land so that we could create this country, right? And again, it shows you a lot about who is in power, right? Because a lot of those, the indigenous perspective is left out, right? Because we're trying to turn him into a hero, right? We're trying to turn him into a hero, so we take elements of his story that are heroic, right? And again, I would say that, sailing off, to try and find a safe trade route and risking your life, yeah, I think that's kind of heroic, right? But there are other elements of his story which are very much not heroic, right? And so, again, if you believe this story of Columbus as the explorer, the trader, the brave hero, what that does is that allows people to kind of feel good about themselves. And when I say people, I mean kind of white Europeans who have come to settle in this land, right? So the dominant culture creates this story that has removed the indigenous perspective, right? It allows us to feel good about being here. It allows us to feel good about what we have built in this place. And at the same time, we don't have to feel bad about all of the bad things that have happened to indigenous people, right? Because that's not part of the story, right? And not only have we created this story that doesn't include their perspective, but we also believe that, well, it's not a created story, they're facts, right? This is just who he was, right? That's what we're kind of taught to think about knowledge, right? But again, this is a story, this is a social construction that is based on facts, but again, it's created for a purpose, right? And it legitimizes our presence here. And it delegitimizes, or it makes, not real or not important, the perspectives of indigenous people, right? And again, as you might guess, indigenous people aren't a huge fan of Christopher Columbus, right? And who would be? The other thing that comes up again is the idea that he proved that the world was round, right? We Googled it, we found that idea, it came up, but in fact, that is not the case. First of all, people in Europe did think the earth was flat. So if you go back to kind of the Middle Ages, people were believing in a flat earth. But around the time of the Renaissance, you see people in Europe starting to do experiments and starting to figure out that the world was indeed not flat. It was actually round, okay? And again, Columbus knew this because, again, trying to get to India, if you believe the world was flat, by sailing west, is a suicide mission. You will fall off the edge of the earth and that will be it, right? So he obviously believed that the world was round, and other people did as well. Interestingly, when that idea came about in Europe, there was a lot of pushback. There was a lot of resistance, particularly from the Roman Catholic Church. And so the church at the time, during the Renaissance and a little bit later in Europe, was a supremely powerful entity. So you had your kings, and then you had the church. And they were super rich, super powerful, both of them. And the church didn't like the idea of a flat earth, because at the time, if you wanted to know something, you would ask the church, right? Because knowledge at the time came from up there, right? It came from God. If you wanted to know why things were the way they were, you should read the Bible, right? Or talk to the priest, and they will explain why the world is the way it is. The scientific perspective, which was kind of bubbling up during the Renaissance, was that, in fact, no, if you look around the world and observe carefully, you can figure it out, right? The idea was the world operates according to natural universal laws, right? It doesn't rain because God makes it rain. It rains because of some sort of universal scientific process. And if you pay attention, you can figure out how it works, right? But again, the church didn't like that, because if people started questioning, if people found out that, oh, the church was wrong about the flat earth, well, then what else were they wrong about, right? And it threatened their power, right? It threatened their ability to control society. And so when some scientists started doing experiments and suggesting that in fact there was some curvature to the earth, the church really pushed back, right? And so again, you can see how people who have power have the ability to try to control the story, or they want to control the story. And so again, the idea here is not only that shoot. Sometimes I do that. Sometimes I just lose my train of thought. The shape of the earth has social and political meaning. Okay, and so again, here in Europe, in Renaissance Europe, convincing people the earth was flat was important to the church, because if you believed that, you would believe everything else. But if suddenly it appeared that the church was wrong, you might call into question other things that the church had taught you. The other thing about the flat earth, and the other reason why Christopher Columbus's story is associated with a round earth, has to do, again, with social and political meaning. So if you look at other civilizations, non-European civilizations, you will see that, in fact, lots of people thought the earth was round, well before the Europeans did. So again, if you look at the ancient Greeks, if you look at the Maya and the Aztec and the Inca, these are indigenous people that live in kind of Central America. Other indigenous peoples in North and South America, places in India and the Middle East, they kind of felt the world was round already, right? They had their beliefs that suggested that we were living on a ball, right? But yeah, but again, we associate the proving of the world was round with Columbus, because it kind of legitimizes an idea that, you know, where does knowledge come from? Well, it comes from science, right? And where does science come from? It comes from the West, right? All science and technology and innovation and discovery, all of that comes from a Western tradition, right? That's the story that the West likes to tell itself. But again, it's not true, right? Lots of people had discovered the earth was round prior to the Europeans. The Europeans were kind of late, to figuring that out, right? Same thing with the discovery of the New World, right? The Europeans thought they discovered this new continent, or they told themselves that they did. But of course, people had discovered it quite a long time ago, right? Indigenous people came to North America probably around 15,000 years ago. And, you know, discovered it then, literally discovered it, and then they stayed, right? And so, again, we have, you know, the story that we're told, the knowledge that we have, is connected to social and political meanings, right? And so the story of Columbus as the brave explorer legitimizes the presence of Europeans here, and it pushes aside the perspectives of indigenous people. And the idea that he proved that the world was round also legitimizes the idea that progress and scientific knowledge, all of that comes from the West, right? Nobody knew the earth was round until Columbus sailed around, and then we knew, right? But again, not true. Lots of other cultures knew that. But it gets attached to Columbus's story because it serves the purposes of the West, right? The West wants to feel that knowledge comes from us, right? When in fact it does come from other cultures as well. Now, I mentioned yesterday or maybe the day before that some people still believe in a flat Earth. Did you know that? There are people, yeah. Some people still believe the Earth is flat, which is kind of weird to me. But this is kind of one example of a conspiracy theory. And I thought I would bring it up now because there are lots of conspiracy theories floating around today. Can you name a conspiracy theory that is floating around today? What? Oh yeah, the Illuminati thing, right? What's the kind of what's the story there? What's the Illuminati conspiracy theory? What's It's complicated. What's the kind of basic idea?
They control the world.
Right. So there's this kind of secret society of, I think, like super smart people. Yeah, and they somehow control the world, but from behind the scenes, right? Nobody knows, in secret, right? And yeah, so that's a good one. Sean says Area 51. Do you know Area 51?
Bermuda.
Triangle Bermuda. This is the ocean.
Oh yeah.
The Bermuda.
Yeah, the Bermuda Triangle. I haven't heard about the Bermuda Triangle in a long time. Yeah, the Bermuda Triangle, right? And what's the story there?
Some people say the ship that come into the Bermuda disappeared.
Yeah. So lots of planes and boats have vanished in the Bermuda Triangle, and so people feel that, oh, something's spooky or supernatural or weird is happening there, right? Area 51, right, where an alien spacecraft has allegedly crashed to Earth and the government covered it up, apparently. 1947, I think, is when it was supposed to crash in New Mexico, I think. Yeah, so that's a conspiracy theory. Ben says, oh, the JFK assassination, President John F. Kennedy, right? So there's all kinds of theories about who killed him and why, right? A man called Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested for it, and I think Lee Harvey Oswald was shot after. But yeah, there's lots of conspiracy theories about JFK. Yeah, there's conspiracy theories about 9/11, right? So the official story that we know is that, you know, a group of terrorists hijacked a couple of planes and flew them into World Trade Center and the Pentagon, right? But there's all kinds of other ideas about who was responsible and what actually happened, right? Currently, one circulating is this QAnon thing. Has anyone heard of QAnon? You guys do not watch the news at all, do you? Oh my gosh. QAnon is a conspiracy theory that a large number of people seem to believe in, and it's the craziest thing. Oh, how does it go? They feel that Hillary Clinton and a bunch of like highly popular Hollywood celebrities are secretly running a top secret child prostitution ring. Yeah. All sorts of like popular Hollywood stars, Hillary Clinton, they're all in on it. And I think there's like a cannibalism thing mixed in there too. It's the weirdest thing you've ever heard. Basil says, oh yeah, the moon landing, right? Some people say that, oh, that we didn't land on the moon, it was faked, right? And it was faked for a certain reason. Anyway, there's tons and tons, oh yeah, sorry. And the QAnon, the Hillary Clinton and her group, they're all Satan worshipers as well. So there's, yeah, they're Satan worshipers, and there's this child prostitution ring going on. Sean also says that Elon Musk is an alien. I don't know. I never heard that one. Anyway, so there's tons of them out there, okay? Tons of these conspiracy theories. And the flat earth is kind of in there as well. And conspiracy theories you can tell because they all kind of work the same way, okay? So they try to explain something that is difficult to explain, but the overriding theme is that someone is controlling it from behind the scenes, right? Some kind of secret organization or secret group of people are somehow in control, and nobody knows, right? If you know your World War II history, you'll know that Adolf Hitler used a very similar theory with Jewish people. He said that the Jews were secretly in control of the world. There was this Jewish Bolshevik conspiracy, and they were secretly pulling the strings behind other countries, and it was all very shh, nobody knew, right? Ridiculous. But again, these conspiracy theories are based on someone behind the scenes that nobody knows secretly controlling the world, right? And when you try to ask, well, where is the evidence for this, right? Where is the evidence that Hillary Clinton is a Satan worshiper running a child prostitution ring? Where is the evidence? There isn't any. But that's what, to conspiracy theorists, that's what proves it. Because if anyone knew, they'd never be able to get away with it. So you're stuck, right? You can never prove it, because if there was evidence, the conspiracy theorists say that it would never happen in the first place. The only way it can happen is if there's no trace of it. So you're stuck, right? You can't prove it, because if you were able to prove it, they say, well, it would never be able to happen then.
Then how do they know that?
What's that?
If that's the logic.
Then how do they know, right? Where does the information come from, right? And again, it's made up. Like they're imaginary things, right? There is no proof because it doesn't exist, right? It's never happened, right? But again, conspiracy theorists are, they hold their beliefs very, very deeply, whether it's a flat Earth or the Area 51 or the QAnon thing. They very deeply hold their views, and again, it's kind of circular reasoning, right? This is a very interesting question. I don't think I can answer this, but Sartaj says, is God a conspiracy theory? Right? Some sort of power that is behind the scenes controlling everything, and there is no evidence for it. I'm not going to touch that one. I'm not a strongly religious person myself, but I think that I'll leave that to you. Interesting question, though. Yeah, so these kind of conspiracy theories are kind of impossible to critique, right? Because there is no evidence for them. And again, to a conspiracy theorist, the lack of evidence is what proves that it exists, right? If there was evidence, then it would never be allowed to happen. So yeah, so you're kind of stuck, right? And again, I think this is the last thing I'll say, and then I'll give you a break. But I think some people they want to believe conspiracy theories because it gives you a sense of power, right? It gives you a sense of feeling like you know what's going on, right? Which is a much more comforting feeling than not knowing what's going on at all, right? And the world is a complicated place, right? And it's hard to understand, and it's hard to know what's going to happen next. And maybe it's much easier to believe that somebody is in control of it all, even if you don't know who they are, than to believe that nobody is in control of it, right? The flat earth people, if you talk to them or if you listen to what they have to say, there's a little video that I watched, and I show it in class sometimes, but I won't today. But the flat earthers are talking, and they're saying, well, no, they don't believe in that, because what's the alternative, right? The alternative is that we live on a ball, we're all evolved from monkeys, we live on a ball that's hurtling through space in the dark, and nobody knows we're here, right? And so that's kind of not very comforting, right? That's kind of that feels really weird, right? And so these people will feel that a flat Earth means that, you know, the Earth was created this way, right? That they were put here for a purpose. That we all were put here for a purpose. That there's a reason for all of this, right? And so they've kind of taken this flat Earth versus round Earth and turned it into an argument about what is the meaning of life, right? Why are we here? Are we all here by accident? Or are we here because we were created and put here by some sort of God or supernatural power, right? But instead of that argument, they've kind of reduced it to a flat Earth, round Earth argument, right? Yeah, so Zartush says, does the shape of the Earth change people's level of self-security? Well, yeah, in a weird way it does, right? Because they attach the idea of a flat Earth to the idea that there is a creator, right? And we've been put here, and life has meaning. And the round Earth they attach to the idea that no, we're just, you know, we're all apes. We're all evolved from apes. We're on a ball spinning through the dark, you know, in a vast universe alone, right? And that's not as comforting, right? That idea. And so, yeah, it's kind of a strange thing. But again, there's lots of these conspiracy theories floating around out there. None of them really have any evidence at all, and I just thought I would bring it up in this context. Anyway, do you want to take a quick break? Break time? Yeah, Nicole, you look like you look like you're. Are you okay? Okay. All right, let's take a quick break. Come back in 10 minutes, okay? All right, we are back. So, we were just talking about Christopher Columbus, and what I want to do is just double check and make sure that what I was trying to explain to you actually made some kind of sense. Okay? So, let me ask you this question. Okay, I'm just going to, instead of creating a question, what did you understand from that piece? What were you able to take from it? What did I try to explain to you? Tell me so that I can sleep at night and know that you understood what I said. Andre?
Explain that it depends on the person to feel how to feel about this
Oh.
if it's able to like that.
Okay, so that's one piece of the puzzle, right? So depending on who you are, you will view this character differently, right? Christopher Columbus is different things to different people, right? Very true, very good. Awesome. What else?
Personally, I feel like everything that's related to rotating around knowledge
It was rotating around knowledge being. Say that one more time. Counterintuitive. Okay, so explain that for me if you would. Sure.
America and the West view Columbus as a hero,
Yeah.
and the indigenous people maybe not, they're not inspired. So it could mean that just because the West thinks he's a hero, it does not necessarily make him one.
Yeah.
See that?
Yeah, that's perfectly valid, right? It's saying that just because someone is put up on a pedestal as a hero doesn't mean they necessarily are one, or are one to everyone, right? Okay, that's another piece. Give me a little bit more. Yeah. So yeah, sometimes people believe what they believe for different reasons, right? And not all of them are because they have critically thought about what they believe. And we'll get to that probably either tomorrow or Friday. We'll talk a little bit about critical thinking, right? And so people believe all kinds of different things, and they have, kind of a strange set of reasons for what they believe, right? Sometimes. What else? Were you able to take from that? Which story? So let's say we have two stories of Columbus. Okay, Andre, go ahead.
Although this, most of the things that he did led to changes, but in different ways. Even though he did that to the indigenous people,
Yeah.
the proof to the Europeans that Earth is round, and he also discovered the land for the Europeans to come, not indigenous.
That is true, right? And so, good or bad, right? Like, so we have two stories of Columbus, right? The brave explorer and the awful person who enslaved indigenous people. regardless of either of those stories, he's a very important historical figure, right? I mean, the discovery of the New World, even if it was only for Europe, that had huge implications for world history, right? And so whether he's a good guy or a bad guy, he is hugely significant in global history. You cannot ignore him, right? If you're if you're explaining why the world is the way it is today, you just can't omit him, whether he's good or bad, right? He's very significant. But if we have those two stories, the good guy and the bad guy, which one do you think is more popular? Good guy? Why is good guy more popular?
Because he has
Yes, and why does he have a day celebrating him? When is Mike Metcalf Day, by the way? That's what I want. No? Maybe? Yet. Anyway. But why do we have a holiday for this guy? Yeah, and we'll get to that just a little bit later. The idea that the groups that are in charge, and in Canada, the US, and Europe, it is white Europeans, they're kind of the ones who get to say what story is the official one, right? They're the ones who get to sort of create the narrative. They're the ones who get to create the story. And so, yeah, it is no surprise that, this, when everyone thinks of Columbus, they think of brave explorer, not horrible enslaver of people, right? That's not, it's not an accident that we think of the brave explorer first, right? It's because of the power in society and who has the power and why they tell the story they tell. Why do they tell the story of brave explorer? What's the purpose of that story? Yeah, and why wouldn't they want to face them? Why wouldn't they want to face them? Yeah, so if white Europeans take responsibility for, or if they accept the story of Columbus as the bad guy, well, that kind of calls into question everything, right? The fact that here I sit, a white person, on lands that, a few hundred years ago did not belong to me, right? This is not where I come from, even though I was born in Canada, but this is not really where I come from, right? This was the land of indigenous people before, white Europeans showed up, and they just kind of moved in, right? They didn't ask permission. They didn't really, there wasn't an agreement. They didn't buy the land from the people. They just kind of showed up, right? And imagine someone coming into your house and just, setting up their stuff in one of your spare bedrooms, and it's like, okay, now I live here, and also I'm in charge of your house now, right? And that's kind of what happened to indigenous people, right? And so if we don't include that perspective of the Columbus story, we don't have to look at that uncomfortable truth, right? We don't have to look at, well, what really is my right to be here, right? Or even if I have a right to be here, why are indigenous people so marginalized in a place that was their land, right? This was their home, and now they have been pushed aside. And how has that come to be, and why is that, right? But I don't have to think about that if I just think about the Columbus story, right? The Columbus story is one of brave explorers fighting the elements and creating something new. And to a great degree, that's the story of Canada as well, right? Immigrants coming here, living in a harsh climate, but building a country out of nothing just with their own kind of toughness and determination. And again, there's truth to that. There's truth to that story, but there is more to it as well, right? Just like the Columbus one. That's pretty good. I'm happy with that. Is there anything else that we should pull from that idea of Columbus that we talked about? I do like what I'm hearing. Is there anything else? There might be one more thing, but maybe I didn't highlight it clearly enough. And it was the idea of the discovery of the round Earth, right? And so it's the idea that Columbus proves that the Earth is round kind of legitimizes the West as a producer of knowledge, right? Where does real knowledge come from? It comes from the West, right? Other types of knowledge, yeah, they're not really important, right? Nobody really did anything important until the Greeks, right? Kind of thing, or the Romans. And again, that's not true, right? There's lots of other cultures around the world at different times and places that discovered that discovered universal truths, but we don't really pay attention to that. We just pay attention to Europe, right? Because it makes Western culture seem like it is more progressive, more innovative, more intelligent, whatever, right? But again, in terms of the round Earth thing, Europeans were kind of late to the game. A lot of people had figured that out already. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Right. So when we're hearing stories like this, whether it's Columbus or whether it's the story of our country or whether it's some other piece of history or knowledge, one of the things that we always want to think about is that knowledge isn't totally objective, right? The knowledge itself, the reason that we have the knowledge and the reason that you're learning it is all connected to social or political concerns, right? And again, I gave you an example of that yesterday. If you take my Social Studies 11 class, I will teach you about democracy, not communism. Why? Because the government wants you to be good democratic citizens, right? They don't want you to be a bunch of communists who will overthrow the government and create a communist Canada, right? That's not what the government wants. The government wants people who understand democracy and will vote and do all those kinds of things. And so it's no accident that we teach it in school, right? And I would assume if I went to China, they would be teaching me how to be, or if I lived in China, I would be teaching you how to be a good communist, right? Because that's what the Chinese government wants. They want good communists. Here we want good Democrats, right? So that's not an accident either. Yeah, and finally, the last thing is that, and I think, Andre, this was the first thing you mentioned actually, is that who you are influences how you see and understand things. So again, if you are a white European person, it might be much more attractive for you to think about Columbus as the brave explorer. If you are an indigenous person, or even a person of color in the United States, you might, or Canada, you might identify more with the other version of Columbus. And arguably he is both, right? Arguably, we'll talk about this later, is that humans often like to put things in opposites, right? Good, bad, right, wrong, up, down, black, white, right? We like to divide things into two categories. Is it this or is it that, right? And so is he a good guy or a bad guy? Probably both, right? He did a brave thing. He did something that definitely improved the lives of many people from Europe. In the process, he destroyed the lives of many people in North and South America. It's a mixed bag, right? He's a lot of things. Nobody is entirely good or bad, right? Okay, so we talked about that. Okay. last thing in this little section about, what's our time? Okay. Last thing about this little section in sort of approach, and it's how to kind of engage with material like this. These may seem simple and they may seem like not that important, but some people have a hard time doing this. And not people in this class, I mean people out in the world as a whole, right? Every time I've taught this class, everyone is really good at talking about these things, so I'm not really worried. But it's important for us to understand what kind of happens outside of these walls, okay? So 5 things we're going to try to do. And I'll take you through them kind of one by one here. So the first thing, strive for intellectual humility. So we need to be able to accept the fact that we don't know everything, right? And some of the things that you know may be wrong. Some of the things that I know are wrong, right? And even in the process of teaching this course, I've probably taught this course 6 or 7 times now, and I've learned a huge amount since the beginning. And so things that I thought at the beginning of this course, I no longer think now, right? And so, you know, tell me if I'm right about this or if I'm wrong, but I almost feel like there is, especially for you guys, there's this idea that, okay, you're in school now, right? You're gonna do school, you're gonna do university, you're gonna learn, and then you're gonna go out there and then it's like real life, right? But to some degree, that's not really the way it is. It's kind of a constant process of trying to learn and figure things out. And so, you know, definitely for me, kind of the further I kind of move along, the more I continually learn. And also the more I realize that I really don't know anything about anything. Like, the amount that I know is so little that it's not even, like it's embarrassing how little I actually know, which is a weird thing for a teacher to admit, yes? But, you know, I do know some things, but yeah, like the vast collection of human knowledge is so massive, and yeah, I know almost none of it. And so, you know, I have to be very open to the idea that, yeah, I'm going to learn things all the time, and I'm going to find out things that I didn't know, and I'm going to realize that things that I thought I knew, in fact, I did not know. They were either wrong or I didn't understand them properly. And so that's part of what learning is understanding that, you know, there's a lot you don't know, and there's things that you're going to learn and figure out, and you're going to find out that things that you thought you knew, you know, maybe don't work, right? Or you misunderstood them or whatever. And so, again, it's useful in a course like this to be open to that, right? You might be seeing things from a different perspective in this course, or maybe not, but I certainly have. We'll talk about this a little bit tomorrow or Friday, recognizing the difference between informed knowledge and opinion, right? And so this is pretty important because mainstream society, and particularly social media, likes to put these things on the same level, right? People's opinions and people's kind of informed understanding and knowledge, right? So everybody gets to have an opinion about anything they want, but it doesn't mean that that opinion is backed up by any sort of information, right? It doesn't mean that it's backed up by any kind of evidence. It doesn't mean that we should believe it. And so we'll talk about the difference between, what did I say with the sorry not sorry thing there? Yeah, so that was a little harsh maybe, but yeah, people's opinions are just that. They can have them, you can have them, I can have them, but you know, when we're trying to figure out what to believe, like what we should believe, we need evidence, right? We need reasons to believe what someone is telling us. Someone's opinion is just not, in terms of critical thinking, it's just not really worth that much, right? And so, sorry, don't mean to upset anyone, but opinions are just that, right? Unless you have some solid evidence behind them. So we need to know the difference between those two things. Some people don't. If you don't already, you will by the end of the week. Oh yeah, because yeah, when people tell you their opinions, they're basically just telling you, they're rehearsing what they already know, right? They're confirming their own beliefs. And again, if they've thought critically about them and they've looked for evidence, then those might be very solid opinions. But again, we have to make sure that people give us a reason to agree with them, and we'll get to that. Let go of personal anecdotal evidence. What's it? Do you know what an anecdote is? Anecdote? Kind of a weird word. Anecdotes are just like a little story. Dude, I was on the SkyTrain this morning. You will never guess what happened to me. Blah, 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 blah. That's a little anecdote. You've all told them, right? Yeah, of course, right? Now, anecdotes are great. Our own personal experience helps us to understand the world, but when we're talking about social justice stuff, we're talking about all of society, right? And so our personal experiences may tell us something about what society is like, and it may not, right? One thing does not, equal, everything, right? Oh, I've got a definition. That's good. Yeah. So when we're looking at social justice concerns, we're trying to look at all society, not individual people or individual encounters. Okay, but we'll talk more about that too. This has not really happened in class, as far as I know, although maybe it happened inside for people. But I've seen it happen in other classes. So sometimes when people encounter knowledge that is uncomfortable for them or challenges their pre-existing beliefs, sometimes they can have a bit of an emotional reaction to it. And I saw it happen when I did my education degree. I took a class in Indigenous education, and I had to take it. It was part of my degree, and it was taught by Indigenous professors, Indigenous scholars. And a lot of what the course was about was, some of the stuff that we just talked about, the very uncomfortable idea that, not only did Europeans come here and push Indigenous people aside and just kind of take control, but as a result of all of that, I have benefited from it, right? My life is better because their lives were made worse, right? And that's kind of gross, right? That's uncomfortable knowledge. And when those things came up in class, people had reactions to them, and I kind of watched the students around me, most of whom were white. I watched the students around me kind of go through all of these different emotions. Sorry, I'm jumping around. I watched them go through all these different emotions. And so some people were, they got a little bit angry. Some people got frustrated. Some people, tried to argue with the professors. Some people felt really guilty. Some people didn't really want to talk about it at all. Some people were like, oh, why are we doing this when we could be learning to teach? People had all kinds of different reactions to it. And again, those emotional reactions come from challenging your deeply held beliefs, right? And so if we look at a culture, anyone's culture, we could kind of imagine it like this, kind of like an iceberg, if you will. And so lots of the things that when we think about a human culture, oh boy, I got 5 minutes left. Okay, this is the last thing I'll say. When we think about a human culture, sometimes we think about the stuff that's on the top, right? We think about how people dress, their food, maybe some of their more prominent rituals, things that they make, their language, that kind of stuff, right? Celebrations like Chinese New Year and things like that. Those are the kinds of things that we often think about. But those things are very kind of superficial to culture, right? And if you go deeper, you'll find all kinds of very complex ideas. And the deeper you go, the more kind of tightly that people hold to those ideas, and the more kind of upset they get when you challenge them, right? And so any of the stuff on top, I mean, people tend not to be too defensive of their culture's food. I mean, food is just food, right? If I say, boy, I really can't stand Indian food, nobody's going to get too upset over that, which is not true. I love Indian food. Nobody's going to get upset over that. But the deeper you go, the more people have really strong opinions about, right? So look closer to the bottom, right? The concept of the self, right? Who people are. The definition of obscenity, right? What things are obscene and what things are not, right? If you violate those rules, people have a big reaction, right? Ideas about age and sex and gender roles and kinship, right? Who's related to whom and what does that mean to be family, right? Those are really deeply held ideas. And if you challenge them, people get defensive because they hold those ideas really, really tightly. And so some things that we talk about in social justice class will touch on those deeper levels, right? And so people can get upset, right? And I saw it happen in my university class. All I want you to keep in mind here is that if you should feel that way, pay attention to it and just notice that, that means that something I'm hearing is kind of bumping into a previous belief of mine, right? And so what's that belief and how does it, why is that upsetting me in the way that it is? And I'm not saying that your belief is necessarily wrong, right? That's not the case. But it's important to notice it's like, okay, there's just something that's, not in alignment with what I already believe, right? And, if you want, you may re-examine that belief or you may not. But again, in the class I took, I had to re-examine my beliefs because I didn't fully understand the Indigenous experience in Canada. And that class actually was really good. It took a lot of work, and I don't think I really understood what the course was trying to teach me until months after the course was done. Like I was still thinking about some of those things, and I still am actually. So it took a long time and it took a lot of work, but it wasn't a comfortable process, right? It's not a comfortable process coming to realize that you are, every day in Canada I benefit because Indigenous people do not, right? And again, I don't like that. I don't approve of that. I don't want that to be the way it is, but it also is the way it is, right? But acknowledging that is not easy. I was going to say one more thing, but I can't remember what it was. Shoot. Okay. Then I will not say it. So that is all for today. Come back tomorrow. We'll tie up this theoretical stuff, and then we'll do a little bit of work with some critical thinking. Is that okay? Everybody okay? Everybody have any questions, comments, concerns, complaints? If you have any complaints, you can just write them down and put them in my complaint box over there. No, I'm just kidding. That's not fun. Okay, that is all for today. Pack it up. I'll see you all tomorrow, or some of you in 20 minutes. Okay. Online people, good work today. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.